Hey, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started towards getting started. Let's see, let me get myself a little more light here so you can actually see my face. All right, welcome. So we are here today to talk about how to spend the next year of your life if you plan to apply to law school in about 1 year. So welcome. Thank you all for taking the time out of your Wednesday for this. Glad that you could be here. There are a good number of you all on the call today. So please, if you have a question for me, please use the Q&A function. I will be watching that. The chat sometimes moves a little too fast for me to keep up with it while presenting. So my friend Katie with TestMax, logged in as TestMax Prep, will be managing the chat. So if you have questions about like TestMax's offerings, about the seminar itself, webinar itself, if you have like company questions about what we do at LSATMax, Katie is your gal. She is in the chat. But if you have questions specifically for me, hit up the Q&A box and I will make sure to get to all of the questions. If they are not related to what I'm talking about at the moment, I may save them for the end, but I am happy to answer as many questions as you all have. So throw them in there and I will get to them. All right, so, and we just crossed 100 participants. That's fun. So welcome. And I am excited to be here with you all today. So my name is Jelena. I took the LSAT in June of 2017, and I was fortunate enough to get a 178. And so then I went through all of the process of applying to all of the law schools, and I went through the whole process up to the point where you had to click submit on your application, got my transcripts, did everything, and did not submit my application because by that point I was having so much fun just teaching the LSAT that I was not ready to go to law school yet anymore. So now I teach the LSAT. You may know me from TestMax's LSAT podcast, The Legal Level. I will throw that into the chat. By the way, if you are using the chat function, please make sure to use the little blue drop down to change it to panelists and attendees. Otherwise, you are just talking to me and Katie, and other people will not know that somebody else has already potentially asked the question that they wanted to ask. So please use panelists and attendees instead of the default, which is just panelists, which is just me and Katie. All right, so this is a new presentation that Katie and I came up with together because it feels like a lot of people, kind of don't know that they might that they are going to apply to law school until, they may know for years, but they don't know exactly what to do every month in their year before applying to law school. And what ends up happening, what we see with students, is that they know they need to do a personal statement. They know that they need to get their transcripts and their recommendations. They know they need to take the LSAT. They don't know what order to do all of those things in. And then especially with being in undergrad, if they are in undergrad, or with a full-time job, if they're not in undergrad, then it ends up like some of these things fall by the wayside until the last minute, and they all get stacked into the month before sending in your application. So that's not what we want to see. So today we are going to walk you through, as if you were going to apply to law school 1 year from today, what you should be doing every single month of the year leading up to it. So let us go ahead and get started. And again, reminder, if you have questions as I'm going, please use the Q&A. So 1 year to a completed law school application. So if you are planning to, and guys, I hope everybody has done a little bit of law school research and will tend to know that the application season runs roughly October to February. So we are in the middle of it right now. On the podcast, we did do an episode that covers what this application season is doing so far. It's kind of weird. Applications are up like 40% over where they were last year at this time. and high scoring applications are especially up. But don't panic, even LSAC itself says it is too early to judge anything about the season from those numbers, much less to extrapolate anything about next admission season, which is probably what most of you are shooting for. So right now we are in peak admission season. This winter break time is actually when the largest number of law school applications are received. So this could be a very realistic time for you to apply next year. Now, applying early is always nice as well. So if you do get a chance to apply in October, then that would be even better. But if you can make your application stronger and apply in December, I would recommend applying in December with a stronger application rather than applying in October with a potentially not as strong as you could be application. So 12 months out, that would be right now if you're planning to apply next December. This is the time to figure out if what your score needs to be to go to the law schools that you want to go to. So if you are looking at the quote unquote T14, then that is, you are looking at probably ideally a score in the 170s, at least in the mid to high 160s. That is hard. Those are upper 90th percentile scores. That means that your study program is going to be more challenging. So that being said, you are going to want to do that research now. There are various law school explorers online. Their US News and World Report will show you the median LSAT scores for all the schools you're looking at. They will show you the median 25th percentile and 75th percentile for both LSAT score and GPA. You should hopefully know roughly by if you guys are mostly in either graduated or in senior year of undergrad, you should roughly know your undergrad GPA. So what you're looking for is a few law schools that are a little bit of a reach, where maybe you're between their 25th percentile and their 50th percentile on your GPA, and you're expecting an LSAT score that's maybe at or a little below their 50th percentile on your LSAT score. You want a few schools where you are right in, you're expecting to be around their 50th percentile, their median, and you are wanting a few law schools that are kind of course, the safety schools, but please do not apply to safety schools that you would not go to if they were the only school that you were admitted to. So this is a mistake that I see a lot of people make, is that they put a bunch of safety schools on their list, even spend money to apply to them, and then they realize, if I only got into that school, I just wouldn't go to law school. So save your money, save your time and effort. Safety schools are schools that if they were the only schools that you got into, that you would still go to law school. You are also going to want to, at this point, figure out your target LSAT score based on those target law schools. So let's say that you really want to go to UCLA. You can't see out my window because we're on Zoom, but I'm like 2 miles south of UCLA right now. So let's say that you are like me, near UCLA, want to get into UCLA so that you don't have to move for law school. Well, you are probably going to want to shoot for an LSAT score that is in the high 160s to low 170s to have a solid shot at UCLA. And from the percentiles, you are going to know that that will be challenging, because you are looking at anywhere from a 94th to 99th percentile score. That means that you need to pick your LSAT study program carefully. So now is the time to keep researching your LSAT study programs. We'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide, but start looking into what is out there, whether it is online, in person, whatever else you are looking for. Nothing is really in person right now, sadly. Personal tutoring, books, self-serve resources. Start doing that research. And Brianna asks, if the GPA is extremely low, can you use your LSAT score as a reference instead? Yes, but if you look, there's a site, lawschooldata.org, where you can look at actual admissions decisions from the last admissions season. That way you can look at if there are people with a similar GPA to yours who got into a school at all, because and I sympathize, my GPA sucks. I did not get a good GPA because I didn't really have a traditional college experience at all. I did 2 years at community college. failed a whole semester because the most important person in my life died. And then I finished my degree online through Colorado State University while working a full-time job and running a business. So my GPA sucks. Completely sympathize. Some of us have GPAs that do not reflect our learning ability, but there is such a thing as a GPA so low that you could have a 180 on the LSAT and you still would not be in the running for certain schools. If you're looking like top 14, like I have a fantastic LSAT score, but I have not found in recent years anybody with my LSAT score and my GPA who got into, for instance, Yale. So I'm probably not getting into Yale if I ever apply to law school. So you can use your LSAT score, but up to a point. Jeffrey, that website is lawschooldata.org. But it is, I will put it's on a later slide because that's also one of the months. It's also a status checker. So is it too late to apply to law schools if you're taking the January 2021 LSAT? It is not ideal, depends where you're applying. There are some law schools, generally lower ranking law schools, that take applications as late as March, April. I've even seen people get into Southwestern in June, although that one had a family connection as well. But if you are looking at a top law school, then yeah, I think taking January 2021 is a little too late. I've seen people apply in February and get into, I have one person who applied in February and got into UCLA, but it does also really hurt your chance at financial aid to apply late because they've given out a lot of it. So if cost is an issue for you, maybe apply this year, but have a backup plan for applying next year if you feel like you would get more financial aid or a better overall experience applying next year. Basically same answer for Chadrick there. Yeah, February or March is too late for most top schools. For lower ranking schools, local schools, you may be able to get through in February or March. Okay, we will talk about those other questions a little bit later. Elena, when should you take the LSAT if you would be in law school at about fall 2020? Elena, I'm sorry, I don't understand that question because if you would be in law school in fall of 2020, that would be now. Do you mean you would be applying in fall of 2021? Oh, 2022. Okay. Then that's a great question, and we are going to cover that shortly. That is so if you begin studying a year out, then you are going to look for a spring summer LSAT. All right. So let's save some of these other questions for as we get a little further into the presentation and go on to 11 months out. All right, so 11 months out from your target application date is a great time to start your study program. Now, 8 weeks is not going to get you fully ready for the LSAT. Just because most of the prep companies offer 6 to 8 week programs, sometimes 10-week programs, that doesn't mean that's all the time that you need to spend studying for the LSAT. That's actually about half of your time. So you should plan on half to a third of your study time being in a formal program that teaches you those things like question types, game types, how to diagram passages, how to diagram games, and the other half of your time being self-study that is personalized and tailored to your strengths and weaknesses. So do not expect, even though like all of the prep companies, including us, will give you a study calendar that has you completing our course and then going and taking the LSAT. Ours is like at least a little more realistic to where it does actually have a bunch of time for self-study and review after you complete all the video lessons. But just know that probably in reality, you are going to be ready for one LSAT after the next one after you complete your study program. So think about the 8-week study program as basically your boot camp period, and you still have a refinement period. As far as the 8-week formal study program, you've got some choices. If this time of social distancing ever ends, you might be able to take a class in a classroom. Currently, you could take a live class on Zoom. I don't love those. You're going to deal with enough Zoom school in other areas of your life. If you're going to be studying for the LSAT online, I prefer self-paced online study, which is what we do at LSATMax. With or without tutoring, if you can get tutoring adjacent to it, that's great. We do offer the opportunity to split your tutoring cost with up to 3 of your friends, so you can get the tutoring cost way lower than it is anywhere else, and basically do like small group private lessons if that's of interest to you. Or you can do, online self-serve resources and books. I don't tell anybody not to self-study. I self-studied and it worked out for me, although it turns out that in self-studying, I basically created the LSATMax curriculum for myself without knowing that it existed. I sort of did exactly the same thing. But so there's nothing wrong with self-study. If your score keeps going up while you're self-studying with books and free online resources, keep doing it. If your score plateaus, think about getting some help. So then 10 months out, you are going to start looking at LSAT testing dates and register for your first target test. Now, that needs to be far away enough that you can spend at least 180 hours on studying. Half of that is going to be in your class. Your class will be 90 to 100 hours of your life between classwork and homework if you are taking a formal class, or your study period with your books and self-serve resources if you're using those. For most people, you're going to spend a total of 4 to 6 months studying for the LSAT. Some people spend much more, a few people spend less, but the middle of the bell curve is at 4 to 6 months. And now at the end of your 10 months out, you're going to finish that 8-week LSAT course. So remember, you don't want to register for your first target test to be right after your 8-week LSAT course. You would like it to be about 4 months after you started studying. And most people will retake. We'll talk more about that in a moment. So do not make your target test the only test that you could take before applying to law school, because if you get stuck to where you can't retake, you're probably going to want that option. Most people want that option. See, do they offer LSAT exams in May and June? Depends on the year, but generally there is an LSAT in at least one of those months. There are summer LSATs are at noon rather than at 8 a.m. So I personally like the summer LSATs. I am not an 8 a.m. person. You can tell from the fact that this webinar is at noon. So yes, let's see. When does LSAC typically release the dates for the next cycle summer dates? Early spring. You'll probably see them probably January to February. Might be weird this year because they don't know if they're going to be flexes or not. Miriam, no, you can retake the LSAT. That is an old lawyer thing. That's from people who took the LSAT in like the 90s or earlier. It used to be kind of like that. People used to get judged for retaking. Now it's very common. Schools do not care. There are limits on how often you can retake. There's a lifetime limit and a yearly limit. Those are mostly actually to prevent us from throwing off your curve, because tutors got into this weird thing. Honestly, like the founder of one particular tutoring company that I will not name, but their founder took like every LSAT to set a record of most 180 scores. And when you have somebody who gets 180s who gets into the testing pool every single administration, it throws off the curve. So the limits are really more for us than for you, because most students are not going to hit their lifetime LSAT limit. But as far as applying with a retake score, schools do not care. They take your highest score. Yes, so beginning our program, Rafiu, please do incorporate our program at least 15 weeks prior to taking the LSAT. So that would be basically on the low side of the middle of the bell curve of how long it will take you to prep for the LSAT. So that is 15 weeks is good. You might want to think about having a backup retake date for that. Let's see, I already answered that one. And then most of these are for later slides. So let's keep going a little bit. All right, 9 months out. So this is when you are done with your 8-week course. When you are 9 months out, you are going to be doing your own ongoing practice. That involves at least one practice test per week, actual official LSAT practice tests. You can get them in books, you can get them online, you can get them from any of the test prep companies. But the important thing is, please don't just test and test and test. You have to test and then review. A thorough review of every practice test you take is the #1 key to increasing your practice test score. You can either do blind review, where you just mark which questions you got wrong and you don't look at the correct answer yet, and then you go do the whole test again. You can retake untimed and see how much your score differs when you do not have time pressure, or you can simply mark all of your wrong answers, review them, and go through all of the steps for solving that question type and try to figure out what went wrong that caused you to get a wrong answer. But you should be spending more time reviewing each practice test than you actually spent taking it. That is the important part. Taking the practice tests, it's a test, it's an assessment. The assessment is not the learning. The review and the work between your practice tests on your weaknesses. Don't work on your strengths if you're already getting all of the sufficient assumption questions right, for instance. Don't review sufficient assumption questions. If you are struggling with weakened questions, review lots of weakened questions. Now, this is also the point 3 months into studying. This is where people start to get burned out if they are overdoing it. So if you are studying every single day of the week, you may be burning out. If you are studying for 7 hours a day, you may be burning out. So to avoid burnout, take at least 2 days a week completely off from studying, and don't push yourself beyond the point where it starts to be like you look at the word LSAT and you want to throw up. If that starts happening to you and then your scores start tanking, that's burnout. You need some time off. So this is 3 months into studying is kind of when, if people are like pushing really hard and studying 7 days a week, that burnout starts to show up. Be aware for it. 8 months out from applying to law school, this is where you really need to get yourself into test-like conditions. So if the pandemic is over and you will be taking the LSAT in person, I actually recommend that you do a complete mock LSAT where you wake up at the time that you would have to wake up on test day, you drive to your selected testing center, and even if you have to sit on a bench outside and do a practice test, do a practice test there. That way it's just not going to be so new when you get there for your actual official LSAT. If you are taking an lsat-flex, which is administered at home only during the pandemic, probably not going to be continued after the pandemic, then replicate whatever conditions you will have on the day of, including what room you're in, what device you are on, what you will have for a beverage next to you. You can't have this. You can only have clear vessels. So whatever you will be doing exactly on test day, start taking those practice tests as realistically as you can. Don't depend on, say, a big cup of coffee. You're not going to be able to have a big cup of coffee next to you on the LSAT. If you get used to having it, it can become a crutch. You reach for it. Even if you just get one more question wrong because it's stressing you out that you don't have your crutch, that is one more question wrong than you had to get wrong, and 1 or 2 questions can change your LSAT score. So if you are not burning out, and if you actually are kind of liking it, which is a good sign, because usually liking the LSAT, not liking the LSAT doesn't mean you'll do poorly on it, but liking the LSAT often means that you are going to do well on it. So if you're enjoying yourself, you can do 2 or 3 practice tests a week. I don't like more than 3 because that generally means running out of time to review. And again, the review is the important part. But if you have time to review 3 per week, then in this last month of getting ready for your first practice test, yeah, you can review 3 a week if you want to. Let me take another look at the questions here before we move on. Why am I? Oh, help. No, don't do that. OneNote is not the world's best program to present things in. There we go. Okay, let me take another look at these questions here. You can't have coffee because LSAC is annoying. They don't like people bringing anything that's not clear into testing centers, so that has extended into the rules for at-home tests. Ali Kiju, I hope I'm pronouncing your name somewhat correctly. I'm Jelena with a J, so that matters to me. I try to get people's names right. How does keeping the previous score affect your chances of getting into law school? They take your highest score. If you retake, they will consider your highest score. I have literally had someone get a 138 who was capable of much better, who was practice testing in the high 160s, because his fiance walked out on him the morning of the LSAT and he was in a terrible state taking the test. he still got into law school just fine with his retaken score, with the 138 on his transcript. If you have like a 30+ point change between your two tests, they're just going to assume that something really crazy happened to you on the first testing day, or that you took a test without studying somehow and then realized you actually had to study for it. All right, most of these others I can save for after the presentation or later slides. So, all right, so when you are 7 months out, you should go ahead and take that first official LSAT. Again, be aware that most people are going to retake, and I usually actually have my students register for 2 LSATs when they first register, just because having it off your mental load, like not feeling like registering for a second LSAT is somehow a failure, can help you with your mental preparation for the test. So consider just planning to retake, but you do lose a portion of the fee that you pay for the test if you do cancel that. So if you get a good score on the first one and then cancel the second one, they don't give you a full refund. So if that's not financially doable, don't do it. But if it would help you anxiety-wise to register for 2 at the same time and not have to make the retake decision after the test, you can do that. You do also now, for the next few tests, I don't know if they're going to keep this forever, LSAC does offer a new option if you are a first-time test taker in fall of 2020 or later. So for everybody who's already taken, sorry, you're out. But for first-time test takers, you do get a one-time option to see your score before canceling it. So that is potentially there. You can use that if you want to, but I really, for the most part, I feel like, most people are going to retake anyway, so it doesn't really matter that much. So 6 months out, you are going to get your first LSAT score. They say that they take about 6 weeks, but in the digital era, they've actually been running early on getting people their scores for most administrations. So you're probably going to get it 3 weeks to a month after you take your test. They generally do send them out a little earlier than they had initially planned. So you will get your score. Oh, by the way, I should also mention, last slide, 5 months or 7 months out. Do not assume on test day that you did badly just because you feel like you did badly. Everyone feels like they blew their LSAT. I've had like 2 students ever who called me after their LSAT and said, I feel like it went pretty well. Everyone feels like it went horribly because of the amount of stress, and then all of that adrenaline leaves your body after you finish the test, and you feel like crap when a bunch of adrenaline leaves your body all at once. It's literally physical neurochemical. So remember, like, you're going to think of me when you take your LSAT and you leave it feeling like you blew the test. Remember, that's the adrenaline leaving your body. It has no relationship to how you actually did on the test. Wait for your score, wait to see. Most people should continue studying for a retake in between, because most people retake now, especially most people who eventually get a high score. Most people do that by retaking. I'm a weirdo. I'm an outlier. I only took it once and got a 178. That does not happen with most people. I know people who took the test 5 times before they got their 175 or 176. So do not worry about the retake thing. I'm going to keep repeating this because there is still so much stigma out there about it, but none of that is from admissions officers at law schools. It's all from people who are not working in law school admissions. You're also now going to start your personal statement. So your personal statement is probably the most difficult admissions essay you will ever write, because it is completely wide open. We do a law school applications webinar that goes deeper into what to do your personal statement on. We don't have time to get deep into that in this particular webinar, but basically all of the personal statement prompts that you will get from law schools are just sort of like, tell me about yourself. So you can do it on anything. What you want to convey in your personal statement is what you will uniquely contribute to that law school's community, to their campus, to their educational programming, and eventually to their network of alumni. So you want to tell them a story from your life, tell them something unique and special about you that both illustrates what kind of a person you are, what kind of a student you are, and what brings you to the legal profession. Why do you want to do this? So choose your topic, start with something that you think is really unique about you that will stand out, that they're not going to hear from every applicant. Figure out a way to tie that into your journey to become a lawyer and what you will bring to that law school community. And then chat about it with friends, see if that's interesting. You know, you might have picked something that you think is really interesting and unique, and it feels to other people like, I've heard that before. Or there might be something that you didn't pick because you felt like it was too weird or too basic. And other people are like, wait, but the thing that I find really interesting and unique about you is that thing that you didn't choose. So talk about it with a few pals. This is also the time to make a short list of people who could write you letters of recommendation. So we had a couple of letters of recommendation questions. Let me look for those now. If you get a 170 plus the first time, anonymous attendee at the bottom here, do not take the test again. I almost did that. I was like, but I wanted a 180. No. First of all, everybody will hate you if you retake the test after you got a 170. And second of all, there's very little, once you get into the 99th percentile scores, there is statistically very little difference in your admission chances between like a 173 and a 180. Really, like 1 or 2 points in the 170s does not matter nearly as much as 1 or 2 points in the lower ranges. So yes, Katie has said a couple times in the chat that people will get a recording. What if your first score is higher than the second? Is that a bad look? Not ideal, especially if it's a large change, but they will still just take your highest score and consider your highest score. What you want to stay away from is a downward trend of like 3 or more scores. If you're like, score 1, score 2, score 3, they're going to be concerned what's going on in your life. Scored the exact same on 2 retakes and plan to do 1 more retake. How will those 2 affect your application? If they're already on your transcript, you cannot cancel those scores. You have to cancel them within 24 hours of the test. So you cannot cancel those now unless you took the test 24 hours ago, which you couldn't because there's no LSAT yesterday. So you are stuck with them. But it will, again, if you score higher on the retake, they will take your highest score. All right, who would you want to write a recommendation for your application? At least one should be a professor. Some schools require 2 professors, although they may waive that requirement if you are more than 5 years out of your undergraduate studies or more than 10 years. They have different criteria. Look at your top 5 target schools, look at their recommendation letter criteria, but for the most part, you want 1 to 2 professors, even if you're out of school, because the thing about professors is they know what you're like in a classroom, and a lot of the people reviewing your application are law professors who are going to have you in their classroom, who want to know what you are like as a student specifically. So that is, professors are important. For the rest of your recommenders, people who managed you in a supervisory capacity who would say really good things about you. Overall, for your recommenders, it's more important that they love you and they want to go to bat for you than their prestige or their name. Like, don't ask the family friend who's a congressman who like writes 1 million letters of recommendation a year for 1 million people. Ask someone who loves you, who will say that you are like one of the smartest and most giving and most mature and best students that they've ever met. For people who have been out of school for a while, so this is for you, Laura, and anybody else who, like me, is in that position, if you no longer have relationships with your professors, still try to reach out, like think back to your time in college and think about like the best assignment that you ever turned in, the best feedback that you ever got, and see if you can get in touch with that professor, anybody who would remember you. You really, if you possibly can do it, you want at least 1 professor recommendation. It doesn't matter if they're in the arts, that is fine. If they think you are a phenomenal student, that's what law schools want to hear. They're going to teach you the law part, but what they can't teach you as an adult is how to be somebody who wants to learn and enjoys learning. So they want to know that you are a phenomenal student and enjoy being in a classroom, and you develop and grow and change while you're in a classroom. So don't worry about that. They're arts professors. If you really can't get in touch with any professors, reach out to the law schools you're applying to and let them know what those special circumstances with your letters of recommendation are, and choose people who are in as close to a professor role in your life as possible, like maybe a professional mentor. What if you feel, Miriam, that you don't have anything unique about you? Ask your friends what's unique about you, because chances are that there's somebody in your life who loves you and thinks you're super unique. Anonymous says, should I take one full practice test a week at the beginning of self-studying, or should you wait till you finish your books or program? Take one raw practice test, that's your diagnostic, with absolutely no preparation, and then give it 2 or 3 weeks before you take another one, and know that when you take your second one, your score will actually probably drop from your first one, because learning how to do it properly will help. It will slow you down at first. Don't worry, you'll speed back up. It's all part of the process. Melchiori, can I use a professor from graduate school for a recommendation, or does it have to be from undergrad? Yeah, you can use your professors from graduate school. You can't use your grades, sadly, for those of us who have a lousy undergraduate GPA, but you can use your professors. How many recommenders should you have? At least 2, ideally 3. Some schools allow you to submit 4, but you need at least 2. How long is the LSAT on this? We'll deal with some of these later. We already talked about retaking. Retaking does not hurt your chances. Jenna, I recommend the summer LSATs mostly just because I think most people have an easier time with a test that starts at 12 p.m. than at 8 a.m. And also because they're timed well for you to be able to still have possibilities of retaking before application season. Right now, nothing is disclosed. No LSAT-flexes are disclosed, so you cannot choose based on whether or not the test will be disclosed. When there are disclosed tests, I do prefer those tests, just because then you don't have to stress about what did I miss. If it's undisclosed, all you get is your score. You don't get what questions you missed, and you can't redo the test afterwards. And I personally would always want to be able to redo the test afterwards. Do you prefer to ask for the recommendation letters before taking the LSAT or after? I prefer after, just because you want to focus on studying for the LSAT while you're studying for the LSAT. We've already talked about retaking. Retake all that you want. They will just take your highest score. Best months to take the LSAT for fall admission. I like the spring and summer ones. So, I generally like anywhere from March to July. Just because generally people have a little bit more time to study in the summer. The June/July ones are usually at noon, yada, yada. Already kind of discussed all of that. If you have accommodations for ADD and you get extra time on other standardized tests, you do also get extra time on the LSAT. You have to notify them. There is an accommodation deadline for every test administration. You must notify them and submit supporting documentation by the accommodation deadline. Katie, oh, this is interesting. Katie King, I know a Kylie King who's a lawyer, very good lawyer. You're a yoga instructor. Is it a good idea to ask your boss, who's a yoga instructor who's known you for longer than 4 years, for a recommendation letter? Yes, try to get a professor as well, but your boss will be a great second recommender. Preference of letters of rec from professors from undergrad versus grad school, probably whichever of your undergrad or grad school was closer to the legal field. So if you did poli-sci for your undergrad and then you did classical mute violin performance for your grad school, probably go with undergrad. If it's neutral, then ask the more recent ones. You are not required to submit a grad school transcript. Brianna will talk about transcripts a little later. You are required to submit transcripts from every undergraduate institution you've attended. Joseph says, we've always been told not to use extended family members, but recently I've spoken to a couple friends who say they've always used a good family rec and it never seems to have been a problem getting into any good schools. I say they are probably getting in despite, not because of using their family for recommendations. Nobody is going to put any weight whatsoever on a letter of recommendation from your family. They're your family. They have to say you're great. So probably those letters of recommendation were not a part of the decision for their admission, and they got admitted based on other things. unless, there is kind of some alumni privilege. So like if dad went to Stanford, maybe son, daughter gets into Stanford that way. But, if we're not talking like, look, if you're like a ruling class person whose family has a house on Cape Cod and your uncle's senator, you're probably getting into law school anyway. Go ahead and use the extended family. If you are a regular person like most of us, use professors and employers. Would law school consider the current COVID situation in the application? For instance, GPA decreasing because of the online format. They will, you can submit an addendum to discuss that. We'll talk about addenda a moment later in a future slide. But remember, you are still competing against other people who went to school roughly at the same time as you. So they do have to compare you against others. And even if there's a reason for your GPA decrease, they might still judge you on it just because there may be others who did not have the same GPA decrease. Yes, if you can tell if a test will be disclosed on the LSAC website. It says it on the list of upcoming tests. All right. All right, we'll talk about some of these other application things in a minute. Okay, let's go on. All right, 5 months out, that is going to be your retake time. So again, most people will retake 2 months after taking their first test. You are also going to write a first draft of your personal statement and choose 3 people to give you notes on it. Pick either the best writers pick your friends who recently got into a top law school. So like they started law school within the last, at least within the last 10 years. Don't send it to lawyers who went to school in the 80s, or people who have worked in admissions. Your mom is probably not going to give you great notes on your personal statement. Your best friend is just going to tell you that you're great and that you deserve to go to every law school. Pick people who have the skills that you're looking for and tell them to be harsh. Say like, hey, look, I've got 5 months to get this right, and it needs to be the best writing sample of my entire life. So please give me real notes on it. So get that out to 3 people, do your retake, and then you are ready to go to 4 months out mode. That's where you're going to ask for your letters of recommendation. So try to ask for those before everybody else gets to your professors, if you are asking professors. So try to make it not at the end of a semester or the end of a school year. Try to make it at a time where you still have plenty of time to follow up with them when inevitably they agree to write you a letter of recommendation and then don't get back to you for several weeks. That's normal. It's not just you. It happens to everyone. If possible, ask them in person. If we are still all social distancing, call them on the phone. Don't just send them an email. It is easier to say yes when you are hearing somebody's voice and being like, yeah, I really loved having her in my class, actually. Yeah, I'll write her personal statement, versus it's an email that you can just be like, too much on my plate, gonna ignore. Now it's also the time to write your second draft of your personal statement and keep getting feedback. Very important to get as many notes as possible from people who can actually improve it. Again, people with the skills on your personal statement, because this does have to be a close to perfect writing sample. It needs to be kind of the best writing of your life because you have essentially infinite time to work on it. Theoretically, you could have started it 2 years before you started applying to law schools. So they are going to expect it to be perfected, not done at the last minute. You're also going to sign up for LSAC's Credential Assembly Service, which is the service that actually submits your law school applications. And once you are on Credential Assembly Service, that's when you order transcripts from all your undergraduate institutions. And that means all. So personal example, when I was in high school, I took one class through DU that was offered on my high school campus through a program to allow high school students who had taken everything available in their high school in a certain subject to take a college level class and get 3 college credits. I had forgotten that by the time that I went through my Credential Assembly Service process. LSAC somehow found out. I guess it must be my social security number. I don't know how. They sent me a nasty letter saying that I had left one of my undergraduate institutions out and I had to get that DU transcript with 1 class on it. So yes, everything, community colleges, that one class that you took while you were still in high school, the pottery class that you took at the local community college after you had done 2 years of your degree, but before you did the other 2 years of your degree, everything goes in if you went there before you got your first bachelor's degree. So everything you did before your first bachelor's degree is what will be considered for your GPA from Credential Assembly Service. 3 months out, this is when you call back all of those professors and say, hey, you agreed to recommend me for law school. Can I ask you when you might be able to send that letter of recommendation? Again, not just you, professors flake on everybody about this because they get like 100 of these requests a semester. So follow up with them, be nice, try to like, sometimes you can slide it in as like, hey, I saw this article that reminded me of your class and I was thinking of you. I wanted to also check in on my letter of recommendation. So if you can make it not nagging them, but like, hey, how you been? That's always better. You are also now going to write your first draft of diversity statement and or addenda. So let's talk about those two things. Diversity statement. That is if you think that you are in some way underrepresented or have a unique perspective that will not be found elsewhere in this law school student community. That does not have to mean demographic. It's not just about like race, gender, sexual identity, sexual orientation, immigration status. It can be like military service. It can be that you are from a small polygamous religion that nobody's ever heard of. It can be that you maybe grew up with Peace Corps parents and you were a child working on like water projects in Lesotho. So, but you only want to use that if you are not using it for your personal statement. So a lot of people actually use, because the personal statement is about what makes you unique, a lot of people use whatever also makes them diverse as the subject of their personal statement. And that is fine. I am not advising against it. That often makes a great personal statement. But if you have already used your diversity for your personal statement, don't bother to also submit a diversity statement. They're just going to be annoyed at reading the same essay twice. But if you did something else, like let's say you're a first generation immigrant, but also a classical pianist, and you used being a classical pianist for your personal statement, you could use being a first generation immigrant for a diversity statement. Now, addenda are the things that are like, hey, there's something that looks bad on my application and I want to explain it. Don't do them unless you really think there is something on your application that could stop you from getting into law school. So either like your GPA is not reflective of your academic potential and you have a really good explanation for it, like my whole family got COVID and I had to move home to take care of them as the only person in the family who didn't have COVID, and I flunked a whole semester. Or I was dealing with an eating disorder and went into inpatient treatment and blew a semester. If you have a really good reason, and it doesn't sound like a reason that would happen again, that is important. Like if the reason is I was dealing with alcoholism, but you are not now sober and in a program, then that's not going to be a good addenda. They're going to be like, oh, well, that's a good reason not to admit that person because they're still dealing with that and will fail another semester. But if it has been resolved and you want them to know that there is a portion of your transcript that does not reflect your potential as a student, but that problem has resolved and will not recur, do an addendum. You may be required to do an addendum for things like if you have a criminal record. Now, I always get asked, will a criminal record stop me from going to law school? No, it will not if you have done the things that you needed to do to pay back your debt to society and you are a free person now. Lots of people become lawyers by studying while they are in prison. So probably your 10-year-old DUI arrest is not going to keep you out of law school. Double check on all your transcripts. Make sure that they have actually come in. If not, I got a question about this. Someone submitted a question in advance about how to follow up with an institution that has not sent your transcript. Call them every day if you are 3 months out from applying, literally. Like set an alarm on your phone for noon and call their office every day at noon for an update on your transcript. Sometimes you need to be annoying because schools are short-staffed and the squeaky wheel will get the grease. They will be annoyed with you, but you will get your transcript. go into the Credential Assembly Service and create your list of schools to apply to. So you should have done that research when you were 12 months out. This is probably going to be just an administrative task of typing that in. But double check now that you have your adjusted LSAT GPA. Often that goes down because they consider things a little differently than your degree granting institution may have. Make sure that the target list that you made is still going to be workable now that you have your official LSAC approved GPA. If not, update your target list. 2 months out, 8 weeks from applying, this is when you upload your final draft of your personal statement and get it off your mind so you can spend the next 2 months on all of the other things you need to do. Now, this is also the time if one of your ideal recommenders has not responded to your requests for letters of recommendation, this is the time to hit up that B list. Don't tell them they're the B list. Just be like, hey, sorry, this is like getting to be a little last minute, but I'm applying to law school and I would love for you to recommend me. Don't tell them that you're only coming to them because someone else ghosted. This is also the time to update your resume. Reminder, this is about work. This is not about like high school experiences. So leave off like the summer that you spent working at Dairy Queen, but put on the internships that you did in college. And then if you have sent out a diversity statement or addendum for feedback, apply that feedback and do a second draft. 1 month out, you should have final drafts of those. All your letters of recommendation should be uploaded. Your target schools list is ready to go. You know where you have waivers if you have any waivers. Now take a minute to personalize your personal statement for the schools that you would most love to go to. There is nothing that law schools love more than hearing a genuine and intelligent reason why you don't just want to go to a top law school, you want to go to their law school. So research professors, research programs, research their law review, research whatever summer legal clinics they may have. Find something that is specific to the campus, that is why you want to go there. And for your 5 top schools, personalize your statement. Make it a personalized personal statement. That's a little repetitive. Double check that what your application window is when it opens. Ideally, you are submitting at the beginning of the season or shortly after. And make an account on lawschooldata.org because that is going to allow you to check your application status at every school you applied to in the same place. Careful, it is addictive. And now, on application day, you are completely ready. You just press the little enter key. You do the one step that I didn't do. You hit send and try not to obsessively refresh lawschooldata.org for your status checker because they're not going to process your application the day after that you sent it in. It's going to be a few weeks. So try not to obsess. Spend the time volunteering or working in a way adjacent to the law. If you get on wait lists, which most people will be, like some of their reach schools will waitlist them, then if you are doing something legal related, that gives you something to email them back when they waitlist you and be like, not only am I still interested in going to your school, I actually had been meaning to let you know that there's been a change to my resume. I've been doing this really great volunteer work in the legal field. All right. Now, let me take all of these questions that have stacked up here that were not quite related to the slides that I was on. Awesome. Okay, Melchiori, does having a master's degree increase your chances of acceptance into a law school? Not meaningfully. It can't hurt you, but it's not a big deal. They are a graduate degree. So they don't really care that much if you have other graduate degrees. If it's like a Stanford executive MBA, they may wonder why you're not an executive, but they may be impressed by it. But a general graduate degree is pretty neutral. Tess says, is there a chance of running out of practice tests? Yeah, if you do 90 of them, there's about 90. But so, don't study for, 52 weeks in a year. So don't study for almost 2 years, 1 practice test a week, then you will run out. We talked about, yes, even if you only went to a school for 1 summer, you must include that in your transcript list. Albert asks about Credential Assembly Service. It's the only way to apply to law school. It is a closed system. You have to be part of it. They require all transcripts from before your first bachelor's degree. So graduate school transcripts have no impact on your GPA. You can submit them if you want to. If you dropped a college class in high school, would that show up? Probably, and you do not want to hide it. Getting caught being deceptive in any way is much more fatal to a law school application than any unflattering thing from high school, so please include it. You need official transcripts for everything, Miriam. I know they're a pain, but yes, even if it's only one class, you must put it in there. Yes, you need official transcripts from all institutions, even if you have transferred your credits, Rochelle. You must get an official transcript from that institution. You guys are, people keep mentioning my battery. It's just my iPad. I'm projecting my screen from my iPad. My feed is not going to die. Requested transcripts in October, haven't received them, call them every day. Certificate programs, if it was from a degree granting institution, I think you want to put that transcript in. If it was from an institution that only does certificates, I do not believe that counts as an undergraduate institution. Diversity statement for chronic health issues. I certainly think that you could spin that into a positive. I would be a little careful with it because there's a lot of disability discrimination in the world. It's kind of like one of the last socially acceptable, quote, quote, not acceptable in my mind, but in many people's minds, reasons to discriminate against someone. So I would be a little bit careful with it, but if you can spin it into something that, like, especially if you're interested in healthcare law and your personal experience with your health has helped you to get interested in that, I think it's worth at least drafting a diversity statement around that and sending it out for feedback. Does the adjusted LSAT GPA take into account pluses? Ooh, that's a very good question. I think the answer is no. I am not 100% certain. Maybe Katie can check that out real quick from our information from LSAC and fact check me. I believe the answer is that an A is just a 4.0. Should you write an addenda, Nathaniel asks, for semesters that your grades were less than stellar, but you are able to create an upwards curve for your GPA? If you have a really good reason. If the reason is just I didn't work as hard as I should have, that is not a very appealing reason. But if the reason is external to you, if it's something, or if it's something that you have dealt with that is no longer a problem for you, then you could do an addendum. But think about, ask a couple of people, ask some of your friends for an honest opinion on whether they'd look differently at your GPA if they knew this story about you. And if they're like, no, like everybody has that story about at least one semester, don't do an addendum. But if they're like, yeah, that completely changes my perspective on your GPA, then do an addendum. How personal can we get on addenda? And then the next answer is it okay? This might be the same person. Is it okay to talk about alcoholism? If you are 7 years sober and solid, I would talk about it, honestly. There is a big addiction issue in the legal profession. Alcoholism is a major issue for lawyers, for people who work around lawyers. And so having already dealt with that and being already in a program, I would say is actually a positive, honestly, because a lot of people who do consume alcohol and become lawyers are going to eventually have to get sober because there is a culture of addiction in the legal profession. So if you're already sober and already have a support network, you've kind of already done the thing that you were going to have to do 10 years into being a lawyer anyway. Your undergrad GPA is not good, but your grad school is, you could make an addendum. You could certainly do an addendum to say, hey, my GPA looks bad, but my grad school GPA was phenomenal, and I just wanted you guys to know that. Was I studying full-time when I self-studied for the LSAT? No, I had a full-time job, so I was studying 2 to 3 hours, 5 days a week. My final score was 14 points higher than my initial score. Where do interviews fit into the process? Most schools invite you for interviews only if you are a finalist, and not all schools do them. Harvard famously does 2 rounds of them. Most schools, in fact, just give you an offer of admission, and then while you are considering whether or not to go to that school, they may interview you. When should you fill out the individual applications for law schools? There really are no individual applications for law schools. It's all via credential assembly service, but you should be doing the creating your target list and doing anything that is specific to that law school in the 4 to 1 months away window. How can we determine if our LSAC GPA will move up or down? Assume it'll move down. It does for most people. But you can get all of the information. It's on their site what they do differently. Like, for instance, if you have a withdrawal, if it is just a withdrawal, they won't count it. But if it's like a dropped class, there's all of the rules are on there. You can calculate it. But the best thing to do is just put your transcripts in and let them do it, because you won't know until they actually calculate it. I answered that one. Not speaking English when starting college and then eventually becoming fluent is a good reason for GPA addendum. If you were attending college in English, then yeah, I would definitely mention that at first you didn't speak the language that you were attending school in. You have a paralegal certificate. Can you submit the grades to LSAC? I believe you can upload them. My question that I don't know the answer to is if they will actually include them. I think so, but you might want to call them and ask. That might be a specific enough to you question to call LSAC and ask. We talked about how to know if you should add a diversity statement if your perspective is unique in a way that you did not use in your personal statement. Last date to take the LSAT if you're applying for fall 2022 and want to apply early, I'd say take it. We don't know the summer dates for 2021 yet, but when they come out, there should be like an August or September, and that would be the last date. Does LSATMax offer assistance with writing your essays? Yes, why yes we do. And we also offer these classes. So here's a slide of our class options. They're great. You get to work with me and other 99th percentile instructors. And if you watch the Logic Games videos, you'll hear my voice a lot more too, because I did a lot of the Logic Games videos. Will your application be hurt if you submit it in the fall of your senior year of undergrad? No, there are a lot of K through JDs. You're just going to have to update them on your final semester transcripts when those come in. How do you get fee waivers for law school applications and LSAT prep programs? Well, either if you fee waivers, I got a ton of fee waivers for getting a 178. So do great on the LSAT, and a lot of schools will give you waivers. Otherwise, reach out to LSAC about a fee waiver for your LSAT testing fee. And often if you can get a fee waiver based on economic circumstances for your testing fee, often law schools will also give you waivers for application. And we are the only prep program that will actually give you a free course if you have a fee waiver from LSAC. We're not here like trying to make money off of people who have no money. There are plenty of people who can afford our course that we don't need to like squeeze blood from a stone from people who can't afford the course. So if you have a fee waiver, send it to us. No other LSAT prep company will do it because most of the other LSAT prep companies are owned by hedge funds that want them to be super profitable. Difference between the LSAT and the lsat-flex is that the lsat-flex is at home on your own device and is 3 sections rather than 5. How would double majors look on applications? Good if your GPA is good. What is my reason for not going to law school? I didn't want to go spend $300,000 if I wasn't sure that I would enjoy what I was doing afterwards more than what I was doing before, and I'm really enjoying what I'm doing now. If your LSAT score is lower than the median, what do you recommend? Retaking, if possible. But if you really cannot raise it even by retaking, write a fabulous personal statement and make your resume look good. Confused on where you are in the process. Graduating college in fall of 21. Oh, fall graduate. That's interesting. Preparing to go to school. Well, if you're not graduating until fall of 2021, you are not starting law school in the winter of 2021, unless you're already applying right now. You haven't taken the LSAT, so you're not starting law school in winter of 2021. You're starting law school in fall of 2022. So yes, you're about 12 months out right now, a person who's graduating in fall. Robert Henry Johnson, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the wording of your question. What constitutes the 178 score? Are you asking what the percentile is? That's 99.9th percentile. That's 1 in 10,000. Sorry to brag, but that is the case. If you make an addendum, is it one for the whole application or one per explanation? One per, but try not to make multiple. If you need multiple addenda, that might look a little bit scary. So maybe make one for the most serious one. Sanaz, congratulations on surviving cancer. Congratulations on finishing chemo. That is amazing. I am so glad that you are doing well. I hope you got to like ring the bell. Yes, mention it in your personal statement, and sure, like a recommendation from your oncologist, if they have seen you as someone who has great dedication and who's like a freaking warrior, then yeah, like you're still going to want like a professor and a boss. But for your third recommendation, that would be really unique. I think that's a very unique story and you should definitely mention it. Got the BA 15 years ago. Does the average GPA of the school info and the law school report come from your grad year or more recent data? More recent data. So check US News and World Report. They will have all of the current data, like lawschooldata.org. There's a whole bunch, like Law School Numbers has it. There's a lot of places to get that. Those are the average GPA data comes from the ABA mandatory disclosures that law schools must do every single year or they would lose their accreditation. So they are annual. Can you apply before graduating but done taking classes? Yeah, tons of people go straight from undergrad to law school. Last test date for fall 2022 admissions should be taken, yes, August or September. Ideally, you could do November or December, but you're pushing it. Sorry, Rochelle, I no longer know. I've answered 81 questions now, so I no longer know what you're following up on with how do we go about that. If you submit a follow-up question on that, I will answer it, but I will probably not get to it for a minute because there are still 20 open questions here. Out of school, working professionally for 4 years, no longer have relationships with professors. I kind of talked about that in the recommendation section. See if you can get in touch with them, ask your school for their contact information. If you absolutely can't, reach out to the law schools you're applying to and explain it. Most of them, like I kind of had this problem, and most of them were very understanding. Nathaniel says, all law schools make you a lawyer, so why go to a T14? Just depends on what you want. The only real reason to go to the T14 is if you want a big law job that pays $200,000 a year, which, like, hey, no hate for wanting that. Like, we all could use a little bit more money or a lot more money. Or if you want your degree to be very portable, if you want to be able to work wherever in the world that you want to. Most lower ranking or mid-ranking law schools are more local employers or can submit you to more local employers than national employers. Whereas if you have like a Harvard or Berkeley or Georgetown degree, people are going to know that school wherever you go in the country or the world. So you will stand out in an applicant pile even if you move across the country. If you are fine working for a local firm in the general, like the few states around the state where you go to law school, save money and go to a mid-tier school. But if you want to like either clerk for the Supreme Court or a district court, work in big law, or have a nationally portable degree, go to a top 14. Percentage breakdown between grades, LSAT, extracurriculars, and letters of recommendation. Letters of recommendation, very important. So there's quantitative and qualitative. So quantitative is about 60% LSAT, 40% grades. I know that sounds unfair. The thing you do for 4 years matters less than the thing that you studied for 4 months, but that's the way it is. Then the qualitative, extracurriculars and letters of recommendation, if they are genuine and enthusiastic and detailed, are the most important part. We talked about fee waivers. Is it possible to get into law school with both GPA and LSAT under their median? Certainly it's possible. You're not likely to be offered a lot of financial aid aside from simply need-based financial aid. But it's certainly, I wouldn't let it stop you from applying. The worst that they can say is no. And I have certainly known people who got in, but they tended to pay sticker price for that school, which is kind of sucky to have to do. Anita, you're a Nigerian wanting to take the LSAT. There are overseas LSAT administrations. I do not know if there are any specifically in Nigeria. I know that there are, I believe that there are LSATs administered on every continent, so you might be able to travel within the African continent rather than traveling to the US. I would have to look. You can look at LSAC's website, has international administrations on there. So you can check there. If there's an easier, like especially with COVID right now, they will probably be starting up exams in Asia before they actually start live exams here again. So you might want to check out that option versus traveling to the US, because that might be a little bit easier to do right now, depending on your personal situation. But congratulations, and I hope you do well and get in, and welcome in advance to the US if you end up going to school here. How long is the, whoop, that is, what happened? Oh no, that is probably my boss. I will call him back. LSATMax is calling me. How long is the LSATMax prep program? It is self-paced, but we do give you a calendar based on your testing date. So it is actually dynamic to your testing date and when you start the program. Are there any disadvantages for candidates reapplying compared to those candidates who are applying for the very first time? Not really. No, reapplying is fine. You're certainly not guaranteed to have a better application season your reapplication year than your first year, especially if you haven't improved your application significantly, but there's not a disadvantage to it. Aisha studied abroad for a fall semester in undergrad. Yes, you do have to request a transcript from that institution as well. Gaining motivation to start studying. If accountability to other people works for you, announce it to other people and tell them to get on your case and ask you if you've been studying. If rewards work for you, make yourself like a calendar where you literally give yourself a gold star on every day that you study. And maybe like when you get 30 gold stars, you're going to buy yourself something that you've been wanting but denying yourself for a while. You can pair studying with things that you already like to do, like rather than just staying at home, if parks are open where you are, you could go study in the park. How do you submit a fee waiver? Katie's going to email everybody a transcript, or not a transcript, excuse me, I've been talking too much about transcripts today, a recording of this. So reply to that email and we can help you get that in. Or maybe Katie can mention in the chat how to submit the fee waiver. I don't deal with the money side, I just do the teaching side. So I don't know the exact answer, but Katie can help with that. BA 15 years ago question, worried about recent grade inflation making your 3.0 look even worse than it was. Well, the good news is it was 15 years ago. So if you've had a successful career since, they care a lot less about GPA if it's 15 years old than if it's recent. So that's good news for you. I would go ahead and submit an addendum though. Oh, if you signed up for LSATMax while it was offering lifetime access, will that be revoked because of the new offering? No, I do not. I certainly don't think so. I have not asked that question because this change of our offerings is very new, but that would be a shitty thing to do, and I don't think that we would do that to you. Do you have to submit high school transcripts? No. Yes, there's a recording. Graduating fall of 22, when should you take the LSAT? Well, if you want to go, it depends on when you want to go to law school. If you want to go to law school in fall of 23, then take the LSAT in summer of 22. What is the lowest undergrad GPA I've heard of that was accepted into law school? I've known a few people who were around or even a little bit under a 3.0 that have been accepted. And I'm thinking of like, decent law schools, not top law schools with like a 3.0. You're not going to get into a top 14 law school, most likely. Occasionally people do like Berkeley or Georgetown will sometimes take people who have a little lower GPA if their LSAT is phenomenal. But I've known a lot of people who went to like decent mid-ranking law schools that were like even a little bit under 3.0, but that you need a good LSAT for that. The lower your GPA, the more important your LSAT. It goes from critically important to like the most important thing. Yes, private tutoring while also doing a course is a good idea. If you can afford to do that and have the time to do that, just make sure that you actually have the time to dedicate yourself to both your tutoring and your course. If you don't really have the time for both, maybe do the tutoring after the course. Junior and want to apply for fall 2022. No, you're fine. If you do it this summer, you are totally fine to apply for 2022. That is great. You are on this schedule. You are on the 12 months to a successful law school application schedule, and you're basically in month 12 months out right now. Oh, okay. Yeah. About showing the waiver, Rochelle, Katie just posted that in the chat. Anonymous attendee says, I mentioned it was $300,000. What school was that? And are there scholarships? I was the one law school that kind of appealed to me was Stanford, honestly. I still didn't fall in love with it. If I had fallen in love with it, I probably would have applied. Didn't fall in love. Most of the very top law schools only give financial aid on the basis of need and maybe give like 1 or 2 fellowships to really, really outstanding students. They don't give merit-based scholarships, which is actually good because most merit-based scholarships are bullshit at law schools. But really, if you're going to like the law schools that get you the $200,000 a year starting salary jobs, they generally don't give out a ton of scholarships because they are expecting you to debt finance your education and then quickly pay it off by making a lot of money. However, they still do have large endowments and they still do have the opportunity to give some need-based aid, but they don't really give a lot of merit-based aid. Under what circumstances do schools give full tuition scholarships? Depends entirely on the school. The higher ranking schools, again, generally only based on financial need or like a couple of prestigious fellowships that are likely for people who have done like phenomenal work in their life already, but still apply. Like, and especially women and or people of color, like, don't feel like you can't apply because you haven't won an Olympic gold medal or written a best-selling book. Like, apply for these things anyway. The worst they can say is no. Like, women always don't apply for things if they're 90% qualified. And so please, like, do go ahead and apply, but they are like things that 1 to 3 people can get. Mid-ranking to lower-ranking law schools do often give full scholarships simply to people who have much higher LSAT scores than their median because they are trying to pull up their median. Okay, applying to Harvard's JD program where you apply your junior year and current junior but taking a gap year, so graduating in 2023 for undergrad. No, you are, you apply your junior. That you are on your own schedule, Benjamin. So if you are probably a year out, but you are on a little bit of a unique schedule. So double check that. So walk back from the date that you actually plan to send in your application, but I think you are a year out. But you're on a unique schedule. Would I recommend doing a dual degree program while in law school, Lastasia? If you really feel like you need both degrees, then yes. If it is just to further pad your resume, not necessarily, but there are some great MBA, GAD dual degree programs. UCLA has a great one. And if you are looking to work as like a corporate in-house counsel, that can be great. Yes, you will have to update your grades as you get them. Depending on the timing, Katie, they may not be able to consider them, but yeah, you will have to update all of your grades. Alikeju, is the LSATMax full course enough to get the right school, or there's some other books you should add? Finish the LSATMax full course first and see where you're at. If you still need more help, look at your weaknesses and look at specific help for your specific weaknesses. FAFSA, yeah, you're going to have to fill out a FAFSA if you want to be considered for any kind of federal financial aid. Whether or not your parents are included depends on whether or not you are still dependent on your parents. So that's something to discuss with, if you're in undergrad, discuss with your student academic advisor, grad school advisor, law school advisor, whatever you have, because it depends on if you are still like being claimed as a dependent, how long you have been independent, if you're independent, etc. If you've only planned the application process in your head and haven't begun, you are too late to apply. I mean, unless you have, still go ahead and take the LSAT-Flex, but if you really, really haven't started, you would have to be phenomenally productive in the next couple of months. You could try it, but most likely this application season is going to be not as good as it could have been for you with more planning, especially because this is going to be an incredibly competitive application season. Applications are up. So low expectations if you haven't begun creating your application. Is there such a thing as too old to go to law school, too old to become a lawyer in a big law firm? I have had students up to in their 60s in my classes. You can go to law school at any age. As far as big law, yes, they do kind of want you young and energetic and ideally without family responsibilities. That is changing a little bit, but they do have a preference for people who can work incredibly long hours in big law. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. That just means that you're going to be fighting an uphill battle in your interviews. Beth, yes, your timetable is realistic. Beth? Canadian law schools specifically, Jana, I don't know much. Maybe somebody's Canadian in the chat and can help you. I don't know a ton about Canadian law schools. I've heard there are some great ones, but I really personally have very little knowledge. If you did a year abroad undergrad and only got pass-fail grades for it, should you write an addendum? Yeah, especially if you feel like your GPA is lower than it should be. Do schools ever give scholarships based on qualitative aspects of your application? There may be specific scholarships, like they may have specific scholarships for someone who has worked in a certain field, someone who has done community service work, that kind of thing. There may be specific scholarships for that, but not ones that you're going to automatically be considered for. You would have to apply. So look at their possibilities. My perspective on conditional scholarships is that they are a horrible institution and should be illegal. Conditional scholarships dupe people into taking on debt that they can't afford, especially for law school, because law school is graded on a curve. And so fundamentally, schools that give conditional scholarships are planning to take away those scholarships from some people just based on their curved grades. Does the LSAT-Flex score count the same as a regular LSAT score? Yes, it does. The LSAT has put a great deal of time into making sure of that. Will patent bar registration be a plus on the application? Yes, there are a lot of people who are interested in patent law, and there are not a lot of people who have actual qualifications for patent law. So if you are considering studying patent law, Yulia, then that will help. When LSAC asks about disciplinary action, does that mean in academic institutions, or does that mean or include employers too? That means academic institutions, but if there's something that they could find out by Googling you, write an addendum about it. Should you go back to work for a more professional recommendation after homeschooling for 12 years and running community volunteer programs, traveling with husband? You're the supervisor charter in most situations. It's completed, was missing 1 credit hour. Yeah, I would probably say go to people who you know through your volunteer work and write an addendum to explain that this is what you've been doing with your life. I actually know of a lot of people who have a similar background to what you're describing there, who have gotten into great law schools. They did have great LSAT scores, so really try for a great LSAT score. But that is not as much of a negative today as it used to be. There was a time where someone who had been parenting full-time for 12 years would face a lot of discrimination in the law school application process, and that's kind of ending. So there are a lot of people who are going back to school after parenting now. It's becoming more normal, and law schools are actually realizing that they really enjoy teaching people who are a little bit more mature and who have had the experience of not having a professional education and will really value getting a professional education. So look into also, while you are applying, look into schools that have a program for older law students. Like, for instance, UCLA has something called OWLS, which is older, wiser law students, and connecting with them can also help you with your application. Alikeju wants to trade contact information with other Nigerians here. So if you want to connect with Alikeju, message them in the chat. What is my opinion on certificates? If you want to go into environmental law, would a certificate add as much value as a dual program? I wouldn't say it would add as much value, but it certainly adds value. I don't think it's a bad idea if you have the capacity to do it and also excel at everything else you're doing. Studying Jelena, studying sporadically for a year and a half. Is, excuse me, is the timetable of studying more consistently for the February LSAT a good idea to apply for fall 2022? Yeah, that's a good idea. I think you've got a good plan. All right, that is the questions. All right, so we are, thank you to you, 86 people who are hanging in with me after and half an hour after the time that we originally kind of set out for. I will leave you with just a little tiny bit of a sales pitch because I am here with LSATMax and I should tell you about LSATMax. You can read the slide yourself, you know, you can read this other value add slide. We've got 99th percentile instructors, we've got a bunch of packages, our students like us. Why I work for LSATMax is because it is a lawyer-founded, lawyer-run, and very human company. Most of the other LSAT prep companies out there are either now bought out by hedge funds or they've merged and are owned by a giant corporate conglomerate. They have venture capital funding to help them grow. So they're under pressures that contradict the best interests of students. LSATMax is owned by a dude named Moran. He lives like 3 miles that way. He's got 2 little kids and a really cute dachshund puppy. And we don't have any outside venture capital or outside board members. So nobody can say, don't do the thing that is best for your students because it would hurt your profits. So I spent 10 years in venture capital funded tech. I worked for the first company to reunite 2 of Google's board members who famously don't get along and wouldn't serve on boards together, but they served on the board of one of the startups that I worked for together. So I've dealt with the big venture capital world and I know that I don't want to deal with it anymore. So I like working for a company that can just like wake up one morning and decide to do something because it would be cool for our students. Like we have this new Justice in Action program that is going to support 1,000 future lawyers through their entire law school journey, from like free prep, free tutoring, free bar prep, community support for their free 1L tutoring, support through their law school years, community building. That's just because like everybody woke up and was like, hey, we should do something cool for people who are going to law school for the right reasons to contribute to the world and who are from underrepresented communities. So that's why I work at LSATMax. There's lots of good places to get decent information on the LSAT. But this is the one that is the most human. It's the only one I work for, and it's the only one that I know well enough to guarantee you that all of the instructors are great because I work with them all and they're awesome. Oh, Alikeju, you are in the Justice in Action program. Yes, that's amazing. I'm so excited that we are starting to have our Justice in Action scholars. So congratulations. That puts a big smile on my face, and welcome. I'm excited. Oh, and someone else here is too. That's amazing. Awesome. So, oh my God, I'm so glad that we've got 2 of you guys here today. That's awesome. Well, are we still accepting applications? I believe we are accepting applications for next year's set of Justice in Action program scholars. Katie just put that link in the chat. So yeah, why don't we end on that note, because that is awesome. And like, you guys should all click that link and go over and see if you qualify to apply for that Justice in Action program, because it's great. Like, and we have 2 people here who are beneficiaries who can tell you it's great. So, well, that made me smile. Thank you both of you for mentioning that you're part of the program. I named it, so I'm really excited. That was my big contribution, was to give it a name. Like most of the rest of that was other people, but I named it. So, so I'm very, I'm dropping my AirPods. I'm so excited. So I'm very glad for two of you to be here. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, everyone. The recording will be sent out shortly, and you can respond to that with any further questions that you have, and hope to see some of you as LSATMax students. Have a great rest of your day.